Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Cointelegraph Live AMA. Today, we're going to be jumping into the world of tokenized assets, which is, McKinsey and analysts have predicted that by 2030, it could be worth a staggering $2 trillion. So it's been a little bit of a slow start, but in the next hour or maybe 45 minutes or so, we're going to jump in and just look at tokenization, how it can make it easier for people to invest, improve how markets work, make them safer. And we'll talk about some of the challenges, that are kind of in the way between us and mass adoption, such as regulatory uncertainty, infrastructure, and to kind of jump off in this conversation, we've invited our friend Edwin, the CEO and co-founder of Brickken, ready-to-use platform for businesses to tokenize their real-world assets. Edwin, you've been on the show with us before, but welcome back.
Yes, thank you very much for having me back here and explain what real world assets and tokenization is. So thanks for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a huge topic in the industry, RWAs, and I think it's going to be really interesting to hear from you because you're so close to it. So I think it'll be a really interesting conversation. So anyone who's watching this, go ahead, share this in your feed. We're going to have a great discussion. But before we jump in, we have another clip real quick that gets into a little bit more about Brickken. So let's go ahead, play that, and we'll jump into the questions. Yeah, so Edwin, last time we spoke, it was about a year ago. You were on the show, and I know you guys had some big announcements coming out around that time. So I'm just kind of curious what's been up since then, and maybe you can just kind of give a brief description of what Bricken is and tokenization, real world assets.
Yeah, so in that end, we're a plug and play solution for any company who wants to digitize, tokenize their assets. They can do it through us in a simple, seamless manner. So what we're trying to provide is actually a solution for any company to enter the digital asset world. And they don't have to worry about how that is performed, the technicalities. It's all very simple. And that's where we think that we can onboard all of these Web2 assets into a Web3 manner. So we've been working very hard on the space. We launched our product last year, and ever since been growing over 230 millions now tokenized in 14 different countries. And it's just because we understand the hurdles of doing it, and we understand how to provide a solution. And in the end, it has to be as simple as a couple of clicks, all done, which is what we like in our products, right?
Definitely. So, I mean, you mentioned some of the hurdles. Let's get into those. I mean, I'm sure if you're in 14 different countries, those are different regulatory regimes. There's legal
Yeah.
issues. Companies that need to kind of understand how the rails work. So maybe you can just describe some of those hurdles in a bit more detail.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, regulatory wise, it's a big hurdle because there's a lot of uncertainty and ignorance in the sense as to how you can digitize an asset. No, we forget about the division of markets. There's private markets, there's public markets, each with its own regulation. You don't have to go with one another. And basically, right now, when something is put on chain, people believe that they're doing like an initial public offering, or they have to go and be validated by the securities law and all of that. So there's a lot of variables, but they have always been. It's not because of the added technology that the variables got changed. It's actually that they didn't. It's the same regulation. Some regulations are being updated to establish that DLT technology can be used for the securitization of assets and whatnot. So the thing about how we in Bricken were able to expand is because we established ourselves as a software provider, and being a software provider allow us to move around, and it is the issuer or the client who has to comply with the jurisdiction from where they do in the issuance, because there's 196 countries. It's impossible for a single platform to comply with 996 variables. So first what you do is you provide a seamless layer where 80 or 90% of the regulation is already complied with, and the extra it's certainly bureaucratic or from the place of issue there's specifications, and you model that. So it is the issuer who's always being able to comply with how they're issuing, where they're issuing, who their investors is. And even though we cover a lot of variables, there's still a lot of variables. But same have they existed before technology, when people were doing everything with a pen and paper, right? So now everything we do is the pure back office of making all of that super simple and efficient.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in a pretty complicated regulatory space. Having a lot of that groundwork, already covered. But maybe you can also tell us. You mentioned ICOs. I think it's now we're kind of in the security token offering phase. So if companies or projects are creating a token, they're launching it through a security token offering. What are some of the challenges, the typical challenges they might face? Maybe you can give us some examples in like a specific jurisdiction.
Yeah, so I mean, from a jurisdiction, when you do an IPO, initial public offering, that you, for example, put equity on a secondary exchange, you need to pass through a lot of bureaucracy. You need to have audited accounts. You need to have a governing board. You have to have a lot of compliance as to why you're pushing your equity in public markets, right? So there's hyper regulated ones, kind of like United States, but also is a trillion-euro market. I mean, Nasdaq is crazy, so an IPO over there is super costly versus one perform. I'm going to say like in Europe, even where we're located in Spain, it's way cheaper, but still highly bureaucratic. So that's for new perform and initial public offering. If you want to mimic that with with technology, you still have to go through the same hurdles. So if you want to perform something that is regulated and offered to public in an exchange, you still have to do that. So what we developing here is the private markets, kind of like you're not in a regulated secondary exchange. You're going to do your first issuance for your first investors, and you're going to onboard that capital into your cap table or your debt offering, depends on what security you're offering. But this is weird because it's not that before it was not possible, it was that very inefficient, because usually startups or companies like to promote themselves or capitalize through venture capital, their family, friends, and officers, so their inner circle. But now you expand that circle and say like, hey, you can now play with third parties, the retail, and then start moving all around. So it's kind of like private markets started becoming somewhat of public, just because of how easy now it can become to get capitalized by not your inner circle but your outer circle as well, the one that you don't know. And it's basically all of this, it's getting weird. Even regulators are starting to wonder if such is a public issuance and how does it comply. And now you have the variables of the countries. United States, there's only one type of share, so everything goes under the SEC. In Europe, there are countries where there's two types of shares. Some are limited liability companies, which are privately governed. Other ones are in public. So again, I mean, we could go here for hours talking about all the difference. And this is kind of like, if it sounds painful what I was saying, you have no idea how painful it is now to develop something that actually allows people to do that in a secure way. But this is it. I mean, we're in this world, right? We're supposed to bring technology to the masses that allows them to do certain things that back in the day when it was pen and paper they couldn't do. But now with a couple of simple clicks, they can get Brazil on board, Australia. They can get all of this money that was not allowed just because it was not efficient to capture that capital.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I think that efficiency, I mean, and kind of the expertise that you bring, maybe you can tell us a little bit about like your expert marketplace. What kind of expertise do companies find there, and how does it streamline that process?
Yeah, so when we started doing this, we pivoted from us being more of a crowdfunding platform where we're also the service provider. And we thought that we weren't able to scale. So we decided, hey, why don't we just provide a solution for everybody to be able to capitalize in their own ways? And then we enter into the second hurdle, and it's like technology can be beautiful, it can be efficient, it can be simple, but we're talking about securitization and capitalization and securities law and corporate law. And we were thinking about it, kind of like we can solve so much to the technology. We have companies who onboard themselves, they shoot their own digital asset on chain by their own without help, and that's fine. But that's not the full case. So what we accomplished is we started gathering what we call just a partners marketplace or expert marketplace, where we started securing. Now we have above 100 agreements with different law firms in in different countries. So if a client comes in and says, like, "Hey, I'm in India," it happened a couple of weeks ago. I want to shoot an issuance here. We connected with a law firm who works with us in India, and that way they get the service layer. So we worry about the tech layer, the application, and if they need help on the service, now we're generating partners to help them deploy that. So we end up being a one-stop solution where I worry about the technology and the service it's provided by an expert, a law firm, a marketing agency, a financial advisor. So we give all of this little ecosystem for issuance to be lawful, successful, and hopefully also super efficient because they don't have to pivot around who's going to help them, how is it going to be deployed, and whatnot. Again, everything we do is how can always make it as simple as possible in a very complicated market.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I know Bricken, you guys are tokenizing across with companies across various industries. Biotech or I don't know, real estate, putting real world assets on chain. Maybe you can just give us some examples of a couple companies that you work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you said biotech. Today we had a successful raise from one of our biotech companies clients, which was for us interesting, right? Because we figured that an asset is an asset for us. Accounting wise, it's either equity or debt. So for us, it's how you use that capital does not matter because it can be used for real estate, it can be used for the growth of your company that is in biotech, or it can be because you're a security firm who's growing. So the outcome of the capital is not where we come in. We come in at the capitalization phase, how the equity can get growth or the debt can get all the money, all the loan. So that allows us to be very diverse. But I gotta say, maybe 70% of our portfolio is still real estate. So real estate is still very likable as a fractionalization, democratization, because marketing wise, it has been pushed very. But for us, we see other types of companies that can also be in a high growth. For example, franchises. We're starting to get clients who want to create a new franchise in a foreign country and they get capitalized through tokenization. So it's kind of like opening the model. But the beauty is, I can tell you 100 different cases, but 101, 2, 3 to 1,000 comes directly from the client to us and say like, hey, I'm a famous stone builder who provides marble to buildings, and I have this, and I want to tokenize my earnings. And it's like, okay, new business model. Let's write it down because this is interesting. We had the fish factory out of Chile, which is super profitable, but it's kind of like we don't push the technology. It is the client with the need saying, through tokenization, I am gonna get capitalization, gonna manage my asset, my investors, how can I jump in? And that's where we come in. It's like, perfect. You know your business model. I have no clue about that. I'm good at tech. So please here, grab the tech and wish you the best of successes.
Yeah, definitely. But I mean, it's since you're kind of on that technology level, I mean, it seems applicable to almost literally any business that wants to tokenize, and then, yeah, just coming up with the solutions, and then letting their business model kind of take it where they want it. I think that's really interesting. Now, I know one of the big issues in tokenization is just like standardization. Uh, whether it's infrastructure or like we were talking regulations, security. Um, I know that you guys are also taking part in the European Commission's regulatory sandbox program. You said you're in Barcelona in
Yes.
Spain. So yeah, maybe you can tell us about some of the challenges that you're addressing there and how that program's working.
Yeah, okay. So I don't want to get too theoretical and philosophical because standardization does not come at the tech level. It comes at the legal level, which is kind of like the source of everything that we do. And that's the complication. Luckily for people in Europe, 27 countries are in the European Union and they get dictated by the European Commission who issues a regulation or a directive, which kind of like standardizes across channels. So, for example, there's been an upgrade. A lot of countries are now upgrading their securities law, accepting DLT technology for the issuance of securities on chain. So that's kind of like the standardization that is happening. But if you jump from Europe to United States, nothing. Completely different game, completely legal, common law against Roman law. So there's a lot of deviations. And if you jump from maybe Spain to Mexico, there's similarities. But if you jump from Germany to India, completely different. So standardization at the technology level can do so much. There are initiatives. There's an ERC 3643 who's trying to comply with something, but does not make the issuance legal. It's not about the standardization from the technology point of view. It has always been from the regulatory legal point of view. And that's the big problem as to why securities on the world will never be the same, because countries by default are never the same. So that's kind of like insecurity is so complicated that I doubt right now we're going to find a solution. And it is a shame because standardization in blockchains, one EVM with another one, they talk and cross bridge and it sounds beautiful and all of that. But that's just technology. What you do with technology and how you comply with regulation is the pain point. And in securities and financial instruments, that pain point cannot always be solved by technology. Sometimes it adds the bureaucracy layer, the agreement, the submission of your white paper before the Security Exchange Commissioner, that you doing this, that you deploying this, just because this is the systems that we work. Maybe in the future things can change. When they change the regulation, update them, and maybe they can establish that, hey, from a technological point of view, you can do this. But until then, technology doesn't make you compliant. It's how you use technology and how you issue that can make you compliant. So technology, it's a helper, but it's never a supplier or enabler.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's very complicated when you get from different regulatory apparatus in one country versus another. But how is it, working with the regulators? How do you see your role, like at least in the European Commission? How do you see working with regulators to really build more like robust landscape for tokenization? Is there a lot of
Yeah, I
back and
mean,
forth? Yeah.
yeah, the beauty of the beginning is the interest, right? It's the interest of trying to come to the private sector and say, hey, like you guys are building something that we want to understand, because in the end, it is our job to regulate, to protect the private citizen, but also try to help you in create jobs, because in the end, companies work and thrive on economies that are open. So we went through 2022 to the Spanish sandbox. So just at the country level, not at the European level, we tested our technology. And from there, we created our application. There were some paths that we thought about taking. And it is through the conversations with the regulator that we decided that, hey, we're just going to be a software provider. We're going to provide these models for compliance. But that allowed me to go against the regulator or the protector of the securities law, the Spanish Security Exchange Commission, and have a direct conversation about my product. And people will say like, "Hey, you're crazy! They're gonna find out everything." And I was like, "Please, I want them to find out everything and all my faults, so tomorrow I can make something that is suitable not just for me but for my clients." So now the test for European is we're more about structuring more venture capital, some family offices, some asset managers, because we want to create models. But we're very good at one sector. We want to institutionalize ourselves. So that's why we went and requested the support from Coinbase on the tech stack, because they have base and they have a lot of different great things for institutions that we believe can help us promote. We went and grabbed another DeFi protocol called Salion, because we want to see how treasuries can start yielding once they recover money from the retail investors, and how they can create money on top of it in a DeFi, which is kind of like, for the regulators, is like tokenization. DeFi is like, why do you guys want to do that? Because it's possible, because
Yeah.
it's there, and because if I do it and I do it in front of you, imagine all the things that are being done without you knowing. So might as well
Yeah.
have this conversation with us. Let's learn from each other. Let's enable each other, because the only thing that matters is what is the future. The future of economy, it's all tokenized. I have zero doubts.
Yeah. No, definitely. And regulator, they can't just close their eyes and pretend it doesn't exist. So I think it does make sense to, start addressing it.
It worked for them
um,
for a couple of years, but
yeah.
that it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly. But okay, so I mean that's I think definitely a challenge, especially the let's just say the kind of regulatory side, that's a huge challenge. But but beyond that, you mentioned collaboration with Coinbase, from like kind of a infrastructural level. What do you kind of see? What do we need for really a successful tokenization in the future? What else do we need in that kind of recipe?
Yeah, I mean, thing is, we need the big institutions to jump in, which some things are already happening. The ETS of BTC, the possible ETS on Ethereum, BlackRock and the Bill. So I mean, even though at the let's say lower level, everybody can test. It is until the big movers start testing that it allows and provides trust. Because I can go and say everything that I'm doing is by the book. I'm legal, but they will be like, yeah, but you're only tokenizing SMEs or real estate projects. What about the big institutions? So that kind of movement, when it started happening with like, hey, cryptocurrencies maybe are not so badly seen. There's now people are saying officially like, hey, Bitcoin is the digital gold and whatnot. But it all provides validation for the rest of builders. So, and I saw it in November when all of this madness with the ETF, BTC happened. We were always in conversation with different banks, right? Because we like to say, hey, why don't we do a proof of concept about your portfolio, your digital asset, the building that you're not using? Why don't we tokenize, we supply it to retail investors? So we always go with proof of concept saying, hey, we test. So starting in November and specifically the last quarter, the conversations have radically changed.
Mhm.
And it shows kind of like the big movers providing trust to the rest. It's kind of like the rest saying, "Oh, now they're doing it. Maybe I should start checking because I don't want to be the one losing that market share because something is happening. If I don't jump in, somebody else will jump in, and it's basically what is going to happen. I mean, here the big movers will always stay in the record, but what about the rest? So it's kind of like it is important that regulation allows these big players to do that. I thought what Securitas did. My complete respect to Carlos Domingo sitting in front of the regulators in the United States establishing, hey, you can tokenize in public blockchains because there was a belief that you could only use private blockchains, and that's why J.P. Morgan created Onyx and supplied
Mhm.
infrastructure to different banks, saying this is the only way to do it legal. But it was not the case because technology doesn't make something legal or illegal. It is
Yeah.
how the issuance happens, and if the issuance is compliant in a blockchain that is public, it can be. But this is kind of like why we need all of these things happening, because
Yeah.
now even with the conversation of private blockchains, we a bank approaches is like, hey, can you use CKs? Because I just don't want the transfer to be known from what wallet to what wallet. And I was like, in a public blockchain, and they were like, yeah, a CK in a public and I was like, oh, this is a moment that we should like be. We were super happy. We were like, this is crazy
Yeah.
because the first proof of concept was super private in a high in a I don't know, in their Amazon Web Service with some nuts that who knows what's going on. It made no sense. Don't make technology for something that is not. Use the technology, the infra that everybody's using, because this is the
Yeah.
future, right? So I got too excited, as you can see, because it's
No, it's
happening.
awesome though. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, and I mean, I think that makes sense. I mean, that's the I don't know, some of the I wouldn't say promises of blockchain, but like I think it's core to like the ethos is to have these like public blockchains where things can happen, and it's like almost like an internet layer, and so it's you don't have to develop private blockchains necessarily if you can do that, on like more secure, privacy protecting blockchains already. So those that actually kind of leads me then into my next question because we're talking now about like the infrastructure that we need, but kind of part of the way that these tokenized assets work is obviously like market liquidity. So how do you look at the infrastructure in building it in an efficient way? I mean, is it public blockchains that will provide that liquidity, or how is it connecting with the
Yeah.
institutions, or how do you see that kind of working?
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of like when I entered in 2017 into the blockchain environment. Some people,
Oh, Edwin?
but it was kind of like the
Oh,
known factor, right? Sorry.
sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I think you
yeah.
froze for a second. Can
Internet.
you repeat that?
Yeah. So I was talking about how at the beginning the blockchain was about mere traceability, right? We hear all about these experiments, but it was not just the full potential of it. And in private blockchains, it's not using the full potential of it because they're forgetting something, the ecosystem enabler that you can hook up to different kind of applications or DeFi protocols or even CeFi, TradFi. Some of the things are now happening on chain. But if you use your private allocated, you forget that all the interconnectivity you can use. So for that, don't go into blockchain, because I believe that the blockchain is how easy it is to connect with different products, offer different solutions in a seamless way, because now it's open. It's all about interconnectivity. So when we talk about liquidity, I don't know any single player that is supplying liquidity in a private blockchain. Why would they? Like, it
Yes.
makes absolute no sense. But if they will come to permissionless or distributed or whatever chain, there are other players saying, "Oh, now you want to play with me? Let me become your LP." And actually, this morning I had a really good call with the decks. I'm gonna say the names, but they're talking about it. It's like, hey, how can we provide liquidity to some of the issues you're doing? How can we create a pool? This is getting interested, because in all of this, let's forget, we're generating value. The equity, debts, T-bills, all of this are getting traded against stables, which is dollars on chain. But this is all generating value. When there's generating value, there's fees, and there's a lot of things that can be played. So a lot of people are jumping in and saying, you know what, I'm interested in this, because if there's trillions locked off chain, what happens when this slowly gets start transferring on chain? First movers are gonna keep whole markets. I mean, this is the conversations that are happening right now, and it's getting very interesting.
Yeah. That leads me perfectly into my next question. So it's like, let's zoom out a little bit more and let's just say 5, 10 years from now, what does the tokenization landscape look like in the, in the ideal way, in your opinion?
Yeah, so a little bit too positive, I may say, but it's because if you would ask me this question in 2020, I would be not too positive.
Yeah.
When I started this, I thought that the whole world was going to tokenize. Which, what does it mean? I thought companies' equity would run on chain because efficiency layers and management makes it more simple, in and out of people. Because right now it's very bureaucratic, it's very static, right? We need that dynamics in that cryptocurrencies have shown us, or Nasdaq itself, in and out. But here it went super fast. Anybody could create a token, and it goes like crazy in and out. So we're like, if we provide that efficiency to equity, then we're talking about something. And the first enabler of everything was money. So USDC, Circle, Tether, USDT, did something magnificent. It's like, okay, now we can transact on chain with money. And then T-bills started getting tokenized. So people started saying, oh, this is very interesting. Now we can tokenize certain financial instruments that generate yielding and whatnot. And then the next thing is private credits, which is where we are, kind of like tokenizing equity or tokenizing debt. So what I wanted to bring up with this is, in 4 years, the drastic change that I have seen, which now certain thing is very standardized. T-bills, I read this morning that they're already saying that next year there's gonna be approximately, I don't remember, like 1 trillion T-bills tokenized or something crazy, and crazy number. So it went from 0 to 1 trillion in 1 year, and that's crazy. So that happens, and what it happens next? We're moving faster than we thought. So my idea is that actually next thing is tokenized markets, tokenized financial markets, credit markets, such as the equity. Nasdaq has its play for offline, but there are other players already building the tokenized Nasdaq version. So it's slowly gonna pull certain new players that are coming in the space for a tokenized version. So in 10 years, I believe it's gonna be quite common for companies to decide the path they're gonna do. The offline Nasdaq IPO or the online STO IPO in a tokenized market, and slowly everything will go on chain. Why? Just because it's way more efficient, and you reduce fees, and you optimize processes, and back office is gone. So if you start reducing cost in a way, it's normal that other big players are going to start jumping and figuring out, hey, this is very interesting.
Do you think it will be a choice between the two, like, the offline or the, on chain, or will there be some kind of like hybrid between the two?
That's very interesting. I don't know how a hybrid system will work, because even, for example, in Europe, you have your order book that is very specific for how a secondary market goes, and then they create this DLT pilot regime, a specific jurisdiction, which allows certain clauses that are applicable for secondary not to be applied for a tokenized way. So they clash against each other just because of how they were born, right? So how they were thought in the beginning. The official secondary exchange didn't thought how an open ledger would work because there was an order book, there was the broker, there was the issuer, the middleman. I don't remember how to call
Hmm.
it in English. So there were players that existed that needed to be existed, so they got regulated. And then suddenly, some of these players in a tokenized version do not need to exist, such as the settlement layer, because it's instantaneously in an open way. So I don't think both will coexist in the same market. I think they're gonna go parallel. But the more technological we become as humans and the more efficient, we always go for the next kind of like now everything is AI, right? Like it boomed
Yeah.
everything. We would go for normal ways now. And in the tokenized way, what I'm trying to say is it's the more efficient way now. So in a couple of years, people will start thinking, why would I go there if maybe I'm more efficient here? I can generate fees of the trading, something in Nasdaq the companies don't generate fees because they don't even provide liquidity, and here they can. So it's kind of like just the process of how we evolve to that tokenized version.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I wonder. So, I mean, that's I think for businesses that are looking into tokenization, we can talk about the efficiencies, the liquidity, like where we could be in 5 years. But what advice would you give, or tips, would you give to businesses now that are looking to tokenize, their equity or their debt? Like what are the kind of the main tips that you would give?
Yeah, I mean, it's the fear of uncertainty, something that we have to still educate the market about. Kind of like, is this legal? Yes, 100%. Is this doable? Yes, 100%. Am I gonna not accept euros? Nobody said you cannot accept still legal tender money. So that's a misconception. Just because you tokenize a version, you can tokenize a bank transfer, you can tokenize a Visa payment. Nowadays, there's a lot of solutions. So it's just a fear of uncertainty that is lasting the market just because people still want to validate what we know. This is not that it's unknown, it's just that it's too new. So first thing is let's let's take out the misconceptions about what blockchain is, what cryptocurrency digital assets are, because this is the new way. So that's why when companies come in with the lead, they're like, seriously, 99% of the question is this legal? And it's like,
Mhm.
of course, 99% of the question gets out, and they're like, so how does it work? And then they see the beauty of it, and they're like, oh, okay, I didn't even know this was possible. So the thing about us, the tokenizers, platforms, or everybody who's in the RWA tokenizing, we first have to educate and tell the markets that, hey, this is absolutely legal. Once we get above that, then the clients will start jumping more on board. And this is why the sandbox is a great environment, because now we go to the regulators who know it's legal. They just want to know how it works in the back, because there's some things that they're like, I'm not so sure. Perfect.
Mhm.
Let's showcase you how it is, because maybe in a couple of years, or with the best practices books, you establish that if it's by the books, it's by the books. And legal might be great, but illegal and legal are completely separate things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that experience with the regulators in the sandbox. I think that's super valuable. And just for your own understanding too, and for the regulators to understand. I think we definitely need more of that conversation. They're not the big spooky bad guys all the time. They can actually be beneficial to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we do have bad episodes, but we have bad episodes on everything. We have hyper regulation, and then we have more light regulation. But we have to work with what we have. And the important thing is not to seclude to all the bad things, because in the end, we just here. We've been building. Blockchain hasn't died. 2021 with the FTX, everybody was like, oh, look at
Hmm.
that. It was horrible for the builders, because we're like, oh, but all the things good that we were doing got erased suddenly by bad actors. But we still have to thrive under the bad conditions. So regulation is the same. We will get better conditions, but today we have way better conditions than, let's call it, 2017. So it's already a win.
Yeah, definitely. It's so funny how many times like crypto has been pronounced dead, and it's like, how many times do we need to go through this and like come back and then just like, I mean, take us seriously. We're here to stay.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but yeah. Definitely, I think the conversation has definitely come to, like, a much better place now. It's not just, I don't know, dark web, like, pay for drugs money anymore. It's, no, actually, like, big banks, and everyone sees the efficiencies. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah, I think it's really great, that you're also kind of being a leader in that path towards, a tokenized future. I do have, like, one more question for you. So I know, Bricken, you guys are a part of the Cointelegraph Acceleration Program, uh, and so, we kind of, like, help Web3 startups gain traction. But I'd just like to hear your thoughts about the experience. What have you learned, or what have you enjoyed from participating in the program?
Yeah. Oh, so now here comes a little bit of shit. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
So it's actually amazing. I mean, we started the journey obviously in the bear market, so that was a very hard year, and then we stumbled upon the Cointelegraph acceleration, had a couple of great discussions, and they were like, okay, let's test it. So you go into the uncertainty, right? When you go in acceleration programs, some work, some they just like, ah, yeah, acceleration program, we don't do anything. But we are big fans of Cointelegraph. That's why we even doing the research report on digital assets. We validated ourselves with you, but also you with us because we always talk wonders about true builders, right? Because we stumbled upon a great group of people who have always helped us saying, hey, have you thought about this? Because you guys are media mass market, so you understand that marketing and the outreach and the awareness goes miles. So for us jumping in here was like this is a big instrument because the more we people are aware of us, look at this AMA. I mean, it's ridiculous good in the sense that we get allowed to thought about thought leadership because if not, it's kind of like you have to build that. So that boost for us, I do believe that we can positively change a lot just because of all the know-how and possibilities we got.
Yeah, well, it goes both ways, though. I mean, the we give our audience, we pick projects, and we, like you guys, that we really believe in, and give an opportunity to educate, which you've really done for me today. I've always had this kind of unsure view of, like, how the regulations actually work, what are the discussions, everything, how could tokenization actually become a reality. But I think, your guys' your plan is really, really great, and super excited to see you guys
Thank
move
you.
forward.
Thank
So
you.
we can wrap up. I just want to give you an opportunity also to, for our audience, where they can learn more, how to get in touch with your team. I'll roll out the red carpet. Just tell us all your socials and and whatever
Yeah,
else you want to
of
say.
course. I mean, anybody who's interested about tokenization, we always deploy a lot of knowledge on our Twitter. So at bricken.com, Brickken. We have a great blog where most of all the founders write every once in a while, just explaining what we think about the space. So there can be a learning. But if you're interested in tokenization, then by all means, www.com, bricken.com. Some of our representatives or myself, because I also jump in a bunch of calls with potential clients because I'm interested in understanding the business modeling so we can adapt further our technology because we grow with our know-how that is provided by people like you. So we're always open for discussions. So feel please free if you're interested in tokenization and RWA or want to tokenize or have an idea, then by all means, we're your guys.
Amazing. Great. Edwin, thanks so much for joining. Would love to have you back on soon. And until then, yeah, thanks to our audience for listening, and we'll see you next time. See you,
Thank you very
Edwin.
much for everything. Right.